James 1, verses 5 through 8 in the Christian Standard Bible say, "Now if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives all generously and ungrudgingly, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith without doubting, for the doubter is like the surging sea, driven and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord, being double-minded and unstable in all his ways." Here, James is in the middle of writing about trials everyone must face in life. He writes that we need to turn to God for wisdom in our trials, and that our trials will build our faith. After this verse, James even warns the reader not to attribute any temptations they face to God. This verse seems to condemn having doubts at our struggles. Christian Ashley, do you think the author's intent here is truly to tell the readers to continue on to what's next without any doubts?
Without the right kind of doubt. I mean, the doubt he's talking about here is more of the shiftless of, I don't really know what to believe, and you're moving from place to place without actually firmly wrestling with your doubt, versus someone who is like logically working through things, who is emotionally working through things. That's not the kind of doubt that belongs in the church. The doubt that belongs in the church is going, okay, is this what's really happening? That's not the doubt that's going to make you worry about what's next.
Hey guys, welcome to the Whole Church Podcast, possibly your favorite church unity podcast. What I can guarantee, though, is that we're about to be your favorite church unity empire. That's right, bringing it back. We're bringing it back. New, improved, and redeemed, the Roman Empire, hosted in from your favorite co-host, the one and only Tiberius Caesar Juan Blackwell. TCJ, how's it going?
Great.
Yeah, everyone's favorite dictator and co-host. Good to have you. And we're here with a special guest, a great guy. You know him from a lot of things, basically everything, I think. He's on all other podcasts. Every podcast that's not this one, he hosts. And we love having him on. The one and only Christian Ashley.
Never, ever compare me to that man again.
I don't know. My intros are in rare form today. He is a seminary student at the Southern Baptist something that's in Louisville, Kentucky. I should know. I have family in Louisville, and I despise the guy who's over it, so I should know more about it. But anyway, I don't despise the guy. I just despise everything he says. Sorry, Al Mohler. I know you listen religiously, but, you know. That being said, church unity. No, but seriously, we are here to talk about what different stages of life in Christians' walks, you know, whether marriage, going to church, getting saved, going through deconstruction. But today we're going to be talking specifically about what it's like to find a church home and what's next after that. You don't just find a church that you're like, all right, I can go there on Sundays and that's it. What's next after you find a church home? And of course, we brought in Christian Ashley, who has recently found a new church home in Louisville. So he'll be a great person for this discussion. You might have noticed if you've been listening the last couple episodes, Niles Merritt was supposed to be on. It's been a while since he's been on the show. We were excited to have him back. It was going to be a cool grand finale. Some stuff came up. Nothing too traumatic, but we're still praying, and we love you, Niles, and we miss you.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And I would like to say a couple things before I start shilling out the Anazao Ministries Podcast Network website. The link is below. See what I did there? I lied, and I'm going to say the thing now. But wow. Josh,
just like a good dictator.
Days on end, he was like, "That's not Louisville. It's not Louisville. You gotta say Louisville, or they won't know what you're talking about." And he just said Louisville like 8 times. Anyway,
like no, it's Louisville. If you're in Kentucky, it's Louisville.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you're a blasphemer like me.
That's backtracking. So, buy merch on our store. Support the show. You could also. There are paid subscriptions on Captivate and Patreon for extra content. You can support our ministry that way if you'd rather.
Yeah. Also, yeah, those shows, they're cool. T-shirts, whatever. But and more importantly, you guys know I have a sacrament I like to do on this show. The perfect form of unity, of course, is silliness. And not a silly question. For this series, we're having everybody finish the same silly story. So, Christian, I'm going to give you the cue, and you are here to finish the greatest story of all time. You're joining the second best anthology, just outside the Bible, finishing short stories that start like this. Once upon a time, TCJ was playing ping pong against a sea turtle on board a steam engine train when he...
All right. This story is entitled, TJ and Turtle Discover the Historicity of the Book of Daniel. TJ was playing ping pong against a sea turtle on board a steam engine train when they opened up a discourse about the historicity of certain scriptures, which they often did together on their train and sports exhibition excursions. The sea turtle, whose name was Turtle, which sounds like really lazy to do for a name, but if Dragon Ball can get away with it, so can I. Turtle said, I agree with Joshua and not Christian, and think that Daniel is not historical, but I'm also going to be playing the role of a straw man in this story, so I believe in names and accurate things for the sake of making a point. True, TJ said. For the sake of this story, Turtle, you are the straw man, and I will be portraying the Chad, and thus, when I speak, I will be correct and on Christian's side. But how are you going to prove that? We don't have enough archaeological evidence to support your claims. TJ nodded his head and looked around, finding that their train was currently going 87.99 miles per hour, and said, I know how. We can increase our speed to 88 miles per hour and go back into the past. Meet Daniel, get a signed first edition copy, and bring proof to the present. And so they did, moving the steam engine train to 88 miles per hour and slipping through the time stream, arriving in the year 530 BC and not CE, which really begs the question of what makes a common era so common, unless it's based around the possible birth date of Jesus. Anyways, they found Daniel, and he was happy to see them because he knew TJ was a good man. And Turtle and his ilk were just misguided, but noble, so he gave them his signed first edition copy of the Book of Daniel and died not too long after this, but died happy that minds would soon be changed for the better. TJ and Turtle returned to their steam engine train, but TJ, being a noble and just man, knew his time travel shenanigans could do even better for the sake of the present day and made a stop in New York City in 1875, right before Helena Blavatsky was preparing to pontificate on her pseudo-religion of theosophy, and used his final rally in the ping pong game to send the ball hurtling towards her and her equally foolish-minded co-conspirators at ludicrous speeds, allowing him to assassinate them and prevent the birth of theosophy, stopping the world from suffering from their insufferably elitist, racist, and poorly thought-out rhetoric that long after her death helped create many cults that ruined many people's lives and inspired some branches of the Nazi Party to do what they did. TJ, Turtle said, shocked at the sudden introduction of a historical figure who had nothing to do with the earlier established story. Why did you kill that woman and her friends? I have approximate knowledge of many things, Turtle, TJ said. Thus, I knew that Christian has long wanted to be asked which person he'd want removed from history the most, and did it for him, because I am a good friend. Removing Helena Blavatsky from history is good for everyone involved. Turtle accepted this answer, because he had grown in wisdom, and they rode their steam engine train into Joshua's house and invited Christian to come.
Into my house?
Into Joshua's house. Do not mess with my art. There, they revealed the book, which proved once and for all that Daniel is a historical book and Joshua was wrong. I was wrong, Christian, Joshua said. Please forgive me. It's okay, Joshua, Christian said. To err is to be Joshua. No. He's been introduced into the story. To err is to be Joshua. To forgive is to be Christian. I have a post-credit scenes too, if you want that.
Yes.
We're setting up the TJ and Turtle cinematic universe later on. Well, TJ and Turtle were hoarding boxes of magnesium while tightrope walking on the Empire State Building in 1931. Right before it opened for the first time, Turtle asked innocently, "So who wrote the Pentateuch, TJ?" The end.
Oh, man. So first, I just want to. Do you guys remember when we did like short stories on we all picked a short story? We did a review for Systematic Ecology, and everybody picked nice 20 to 30 page stories. And TJ said 100 pages is still a short story, right?
It is short. That's a short story.
Mm-hmm. Well, I feel like
not that
Christian
many words.
just pulled the TJ to this answer.
Half of the pages are pictures.
Also, I just want to point out, in my mind, the most ridiculous part of that story was my response being Christian was right. Not because I wouldn't admit Christian was right. Of course I would. But I think my immediate response would be, TJ, you brought me a turtle? Just so you know, if you drive a time travel train into my house with a turtle that talks, I think my first thing being said probably won't be Christian is right.
That's why this is the first draft.
Mhm. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's fair.
I also spent way more time on this than I did actually studying the other answers to the rest of this. So we'll see how today goes.
Really? Never would have guessed.
Yeah, that was the most important part anyway. Actually, you want to wrap this one up?
All right. Yeah, God moment.
Oh.
God good. Hell bad. See you
Okay,
next
but
week.
in all seriousness, to start this off, we were hoping you could explain what do people mean when they use the term church home? For those who haven't heard of it, or those who heard of it and went, "What? Huh?" You know, whether they've heard of it or not, what do we mean when we say church home, and why do you believe it's important to find a church home?
Yeah. I mean, simply put, your church home is the people, the community, and the church you're attending. And the fellowship you have with them, the time you spend even in church and out of church with them, because that's number one, what we're commanded to do. But number two, because of how important it is to not be alone and not do things on your own, because we're not good on our own. So we need that community to keep each other accountable.
So my community is TJ and the Turtle, I suppose, to keep me accountable about Daniel.
Yes, of course.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that checks out.
Yeah, and I don't want to make the whole thing about like story nitpicking, but how did we get the train over there?
Back to the Future, didn't get that reference?
Back to the Future, they never leave Hill Valley
Yeah,
because he can't figure out how to get the DeLorean to go through space. Only time. But what can you tell us about your church homes right now?
right now, as Joshua mentioned earlier, I did just join a new church up here in Louisville, Walnut Street Baptist Church.
Louisville.
Whatever. And as a result of, I was attending another church. It was fine, nothing wrong with it, but I just didn't feel like where I was supposed to be. So looked around in a couple of other churches, was invited here by a friend of mine, and fell in love with it. Solid preaching, great people to get along with, great teachers as well to learn under, a community center that we're rebuilding right now that I'm getting to be a part of. Can't really say too many bad things about it.
There should be a website called Rate. There should be a website called Rate Your Pastor, like Rate My Professor.
Yeah.
We need that.
Also, the train could have been a TARDIS in chameleon mode still.
Nope.
Maybe the chameleon feature didn't break on this TARDIS.
Nope.
So it just looks like a train.
Or maybe
the author
BC,
mentioned it had to be 88 miles an hour. That means it's thematically relevant.
But in 530 BC, the Earth was spinning in a different way. Therefore, that's where they needed to go.
Anyway,
oh, this series.
what's where are we at in this?
So this series, or What's Next series, started as sort of a joke because we were running out of ideas for the show, and we just kind of asked, thought we'd ask a few previous guests what we should do next. And we've talked to church leaders from, different traditions and ethnic backgrounds, and we've talked to people from all over the world. We've done series on church offices, worship styles, me and the Turtle, Sun Wukong, whatever. But what do you think we should do next, Christian?
Okay. I thought about this for a while. I sent one to Joshua earlier just in case I forgot it, but I was able to remember today. I think there's nothing wrong with just individually going over different books of the Bible, seeing what they have to say, not only just about unity, but in general that could be applied to our lives. That'd be a good one. Maybe even look at how different churches, interpret those particular books, invite people on. The one I sent to him was going over the early church fathers and seeing how they promoted community in their own times, but also there are plenty of other scholars out there who'd love to talk about them and see what they have to say on certain matters. And I think the last one I had was seeing how far you could go internationally, because you've got different people, mostly from the U.S. that you've talked to here, but maybe there's someone out there that, Africa, Asia, wherever, that would be open to talking to you guys about how the church is being unified over there.
Yeah, I think we kind of went kind of hard. We skipped from here to Australia, and then started filling in some of the gaps between.
We did
here and
Jerusalem.
Australia.
Oh yeah. Okay, I see.
Yeah,
see what happened there.
Yeah. But yeah, no, that's fun. It's a good idea. So another
That
thing
is
we're
a good
doing
idea.
for
Rachel
the
Chan
what's
could be
next.
part of that.
Yeah. So another thing we're doing for the what's next series is we're gonna play First Thoughts, Christian. Right? You familiar with the
Okay.
concept of First Thoughts? We don't have any
Yes.
pennies to offer you,
Hmm.
but I'm gonna need to give you a number between 1 and 26.
Okay. I'll go 7.
7's a good number. 7's a good number. I really thought you were just gonna say 26. So I'm gonna give you 7 words, and I need your first thoughts when you hear that word. Are you ready?
Go for it.
Marvel
Spider-Man.
podcast.
Uh,
One more time.
Can you guys hear me?
I can hear
Yes.
you.
Let's start first thoughts over because the music did cut you out. Turns out the setting thing that we tried doesn't work.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah.
So another thing
Start
we're
back
doing
at first
on the So another thing we're doing for the What's Next series is we're going to play First Thoughts. Are you familiar with the concept?
Yes,
I'm
I
going
am.
to say a word. You're going to say the first thing. All right. So I need you to give me a number 1 through 26.
Let's go for 7.
Okay. 7's a good number. I like 7. I'm going to give you 7 words, and I need your first thought after you hear the word. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
Imago Dei,
People.
Islam,
False.
Beowulf,
Cool.
cool. Podcast,
Community.
Atonement,
Perfect.
Jesus.
Love.
Your response doesn't have to be one word.
Oh, it doesn't?
No,
No.
just your first thoughts.
No. I was
Whatever
thinking
works on your
monosyllabically.
Works though.
Yeah.
First syllable, Trinity.
3 and 1.
All right. That's 7. World
Bonus
record
round.
day.
One more.
Bonus
Banana.
round. Hannah Cheek. She is a friend of ours from college who has an irrational fear of bananas. And that
I
tickles
knew I
me
wouldn't
today.
regret doing a bonus round. Fantastic. Yeah, that's good stuff. All right. With that out of the way, back to the real topic. Whether it's going to college or seminary like you did, maybe moving to a new town, it can be really difficult to find a new church home. So Christian, how would you recommend people go about searching for a church home? Like, give them a step-to-step guide.
Yeah. I mean, moving to a new place, if you don't have pre-established friends there, say, hey, this is a good spot to check out. I mean, we live in a digital age. Look online. Most churches have their beliefs, what they do in the community on their website. So if there's something that really appeals to you or maybe something that doesn't, all you have to do for the most part, and this is not 100%, well, therefore I'm going to get the perfect church out of this, but you can look at what they say, what their articles of belief are, what statements they make on certain political issues as well, and then go, okay, well, I think I might fit in here. And I would check those out first before I went anywhere else.
I have a question since you
Go for
brought
it.
up online. TJ was joking earlier, I think, when he said the rate my pastor thing, but churches have ratings on Google. Would you take that into account? Like if a church had a 1 out of 5 star, would you, or a 5 out of 5 star, does that matter to you?
I mean, I would look at what people had to say, and if it was something reasonable, be like, hey, like, grew up here and people were abusive, and then you see that more than once, yeah, a bit of a huge red flag. If it's something like, well, I just think the pastor, his interpretation of Joel is something I would never believe in, and you give a 1 star to that, then probably.
Or he thinks Daniel's a historic book.
Well, then that's a huge
the difference, though.
You can't give a 6
the
out of 5
difference,
there.
though, if
0 out of
somebody specifically says I don't like the pastor's interpretation of Joel, I'm gonna believe him. That review is true. Nobody made that up.
That is
It's
so
the first-
specific.
First biblical book I could think of in that moment.
Yeah. So
I'm so curious why.
It's just the first one that came to mind.
We're not playing first thoughts anymore.
Yeah.
So should denominational loyalty play any part in looking for a new church home?
Absolutely. I mean, for the most part, I mean, if you're going to be the one participating in the church, chances are you either come from a non-denominational or a denominational background where you are already had these preconceived ideas of what works for you in church. So going somewhere else, chances are that's either going to continue. And if it doesn't, you know, you're going to have to learn how to work with it. And if not, you're going to find a better fit for yourself. So I'm not saying if you be Southern Baptist, I have to go to a Southern Baptist church the next time I find a new church or the next time I lead a new church. It could be non-denominational, but it'd be a lot harder for me to say, be a Lutheran pastor or Episcopalian or something like that. It'd be extremely difficult to go from one tradition to one that is very different than the other.
Yeah,
Right.
and it's not necessarily flavor either. I'm gonna go off the outline for a little bit, and TJ's gonna fix it later because he's nice and kind like that. This is why TJ's here. Sorry, TCJ. But we both came up with really elaborate stories about TCJ today. So I'm trying to figure out how to word my thought here. More or less, my thought is I'm a member of Pastor Will's church. People who listen to this are probably familiar with Pastor Will, the Lutheran pastor. ELCA, Chapel Hill, North Carolina. What kind of church are you a member of right now, Christian?
Southern Baptist.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I didn't want to misspeak.
Yes.
For actual doctrinal and belief reasons, I don't think, like, I could attend your church, but I would never be able to be a member, and I think probably vice versa. And that's not to say that the churches would kick us out. Pastor Will would probably welcome you as a member, but I don't think you yourself would want to be, just because of some of the differences of belief and stuff there.
Yes.
How do we handle those conversations without, like, trashing a church of, like, you know, like, oh, they just don't believe the Bible, or they just don't understand love, their God's a hateful God, you know, whatever. I mean, how do we keep from trashing one another and still hold to, yeah, that church might not be for me, even if it's because of belief reasons, like, which are, you know, very serious. But
I was just having this conversation with a friend of mine the other day in regards to us. It's like, how can you work with people? He was talking about episodes that don't think what you do on these things. And I'm like, well, number one, because I'm not the only voice people need to be hearing. Number two, yeah, I vehemently disagree with some of the takes here. You know, the Daniel was, you know, tongue in cheek for the most part as a story, but yeah, Joshua and I are never going to agree on that thing. You know, I believe in inerrancy of scripture and stuff like that. So, but part of life is working with people that you don't get. And even in a church setting where you are unified by these, you know, grander ideals of, hey, I believe in believers' baptism. I believe you do it once, you're done. I believe your salvation is once and done. But there are going to be people within that church who are going to think slightly little differently about me. Can there be female deacons? I would say yes. Some Southern Baptist churches would say no. How are you going to reconcile those things? You've got to learn how to do that within your own church. So if you can't do it there, it's going to be a lot more difficult to do it with other churches in your community. And I forgot the original question. Joshua, can you reword it for me, please?
it was less a question, more of just like a thought. Okay. I wanted to kind of bounce back and forth.
Yeah. And I told him, like, look, if I want to learn how to work with people within my own church who, for the most part, believe like me, but there are these slight differences, I'm going to have to learn how to understand them, how to work with them. So why not challenge myself more by working with people who most definitely don't think the same way I do on certain matters? And I get to be that voice for other people to hear my side of things. That wouldn't have been there if I decide, well, they don't believe what I believe. Screw them.
Yeah. And I feel like it's good that we brought this up, because this brings up one of the biggest challenges, or what was one of the biggest challenges for me trying to find a church home. And I don't think I'm alone in this. So, hey, maybe this will be helpful to somebody. There's not a denomination out there that I'm like, I agree with all this stuff. Like there's just not one. It doesn't exist.
Yes.
From my understanding, The Lutheran stance on salvation is more or less that you can't lose it kind of deal. And that's not where I fall. I fall more on the Pentecostal side of that. Like, I still go back to like my church. I got a prophecy roots of like, no, you sure can. There are all kinds of verses of like, hey, fight so that you don't lose your salvation. You know, keep carrying on. Hold on to that faith. Like, why are we holding on if I can't lose it anyway? You know, like there's so many verses in the Bible that I feel like support that. And even like when we get to like the weird nuanced stuff, like to me, inerrancy, that doesn't work. But also, I know a lot of people with inerrancy that I respect who are inerrant and also don't think Daniel's historic, because you can be both. But no, you know what I mean. Like I'm kind of jesting about that, but like there's a lot of kind of nuance. There's a lot of stuff in Lutheran Church that I'm like, yeah, I don't agree with a lot of this stuff. I'm still not sure where I stand on baby baptism, but I've found that it's easier for me to find a church home where I'm like, I don't know how I feel about baby baptism. I don't know if I agree with you about whether salvation can be lost or not, but I can be pretty certain that Will's not going to get behind the pulpit and talk about why the gays are ruining our country, or why, you know, Democrats are the enemy, or, you know, like Will's not going to get up and do some hate spill. And for me, that's the big priority, where I'm like, I know that Will's going to talk, and even if I disagree with him, I'm going to be encouraged to love better. And that's why I go to church, because I want that community with others, and I want to be encouraged to love people better. And even if I disagree, if that's why I'm going and that's being achieved, cool.
Fair enough.
Christian thoughts? Sorry, that's not a question either.
Of course not. Once again, I get thrown to the wolves. This is revenge.
Yeah. Here we go. Put me on Let Nothing Move You Again. I dare you. Seriously, Leviticus is coming up. Yeah.
I will be asking fairly soon. But, I mean, seriously, you look at this and you go, what works for me may not work for someone else. Your priorities and what you're looking for in a church are not mine. They don't have to be, because that's you. That's an expression of the Imago Dei within you to think a little differently than me, because God is way more than me. As much as sometimes I try and uplift myself to that position, I don't need to, because I'm nowhere close to him. Including, I'm just thinking of that Return of the Jafar episode we just did. I was about 5 seconds away from claiming I was God, just to shut up Joe and Pang for their very bad takes on the movie.
I haven't listened to this episode yet, and I can't wait to hear it. That's Systematic Ecology for those listening. Yeah. Great.
You think it's good?
Check it out.
What?
It is good.
It is good.
Yeah.
It's not correct. The best, but it's good.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. And so is King of Thieves. Fight me.
Oh, yes. I agree with that as well.
Me and Christian agreeing. This is great. Let's stay on that.
But your priorities, listener, are going to be way different than mine. So I'm definitely going to disagree with some of them. You're definitely going to disagree with some of mine. But if what gets you into that church community, what gets you volunteering is a different method than where it takes me, I mean, sure, I'm still going to disagree. Parts, you're still going to disagree with me, but you're in church. You're being faithful. You're doing things for the community, for the good of the world that we are supposed to work inside of. At the end of the day, even I would say, if you're going to do wrong right. I would rather you be in a church and serving somewhere and have some bad theology than not being in a church and having terrible theology.
I'm going to use a really dangerous analogy here.
Ooh.
Yeah. I'm going with the Democratic Party in America in the year 2024. Because here's the thing, like put your imaginary caps on and just say that you are a Democrat. You just are one now. It's a very different thing that I am a Democrat and I'm all for the Joe Biden campaign than to say you're a Democrat who's all for the Kamala Harris campaign. Yes, TJ?
There is no Joe Biden campaign.
But
there was at one point in time. It existed.
Yeah.
And if you're watching the current DNC meetings, like his speech was basically a campaign speech. He didn't bother to change his speech. But anyway, they have pretty much the same beliefs, pretty much the same policies, but Biden's campaign was very much the other side. The world's going to be doomed, and it's very dark. And whether you like it or not, Kamala's policies are very fun and hype and happy. You know what I mean? Like Like, I feel like even as, let's say I feel like I need to go to an SBC church because I like their beliefs, you might go to one where you're like, this is all doom and gloom and I don't like it. Or this is too happy and I don't like it. You're like, there is a level of this of personality is what I think what I'm getting at.
Yeah. I mean, I've attended some Hellfire and Brimstone churches before as a visitor and been like, well, that was a noble attempt, but I ain't coming back.
Yeah. Yeah.
First day at a new church, Revelations time.
You know what? I got to say, my favorite thing my parents' churches ever did is when their pastor, Pastor Gary Atkins, been on the show before, first ever guest of the Whole Church podcast. He did like a 3-year long series on Revelation, and those are the first sermons I ever remember. Mind you, I've been in church my whole life, but those are the first ones I actually remember because I was like, because I've always been a nerd, I guess, and I didn't have as much biblical knowledge, and someone breaking down what this stuff could or could not mean, I was like, oh, wait a minute, here we go. Time to geek out. Revelation is the easiest book to geek out on in the Bible. End quote.
Guess at the end of the day, you're all wrong.
Yeah.
And so am I.
Yeah, and that goes back to this whole thing of like figuring out what church you are, like, and why we can work with people who maybe we don't agree with is, to quote the great Reverend Justin Coleman, the most quoted guest of the Whole Church podcast. Thank God there's not a theology test when we get to heaven.
There's deservedly so.
Yeah.
That would be pretty fun.
Great guy. Turns out we've been quoting him this whole time, and God's like, Justin was wrong. Here's your test.
Yeah. It's not even like it's not like the ACTs or the SATs or anything. It's like your times tables in second grade. You get a minute and a half to answer this entire test.
Take an atonement theory. If you're wrong, you're not atoned for.
Closed book. Goodness gracious. Just
No,
with
open the book. You think opening the book's going to help?
No, the fill in the blank answer with just one option. I'm screwed.
What was Jesus' middle name?
H.
If opening the book helped, we wouldn't have to have these discussions.
Anyway, so to get back to the outline, and yeah, I'm breaking that. Like, I feel like there's like the podcast fourth wall is different than the movie fourth wall, and this is the fourth wall I'm breaking. Going back to the outline, do we still owe anything to church communities that we have left? So if I left one church and searched for a new church home, whether that's because I moved or whether it's because I changed my beliefs, which for me personally is a little bit of both, do I owe anything to that previous community that I was a part of?
I mean, it really depends on your relationship with them. Like, for instance, my church back home, I still maintain contact with people there. I still talk to the former pastor who retired. When I'm making difficult decisions, he's going to be one of the first people I talk to because he's held me in his hands in a very wise way for many years. But as far as like allegiances, well, no, I'm at this new church now. I'm trying to figure out where to fit in here, what's going on. So, yeah, your old church was there for a reason. They're fun. That they were a part of your experience of growing up, but you don't report back to them on what the other church is doing. You don't you're not there to infiltrate and evangelize to people, because if you're in a church, you should probably be okay anyways. So there's a newer priority. That doesn't mean you just get rid of, I want to say alliances, made this way worse than it sounds, relationships with people from the old church. That just means they're not as big a priority as what you are starting elsewhere.
Yeah. And I mean, man, I really wish Niles was on for this, because there's two different levels to this. I would no longer go to my parents' pastor for most advice. Not because I hate him or I despise him. I love that guy. Pastor Gary is one of the best people I know. Just point blank. If I have a question about SpongeBob, I might go to him. If I have a question specifically about like numenology or talking about like specifically about like Holy Spirit stuff, there's still a good chance I would go to him like with certain questions. But he is not my pastor. He doesn't know what's going on in my life right now. I haven't been keeping updates with him or anything like that. So my pastor is Will. I'm going to go to Will. And that's not because of a hate for that old community or anything. And yet, there's still all these other church communities. When I see Niles Merritt, I'm like, oh man, we were church together. You know, like church is the community. And I'm like, oh, me, Christian, Niles, Matt, Brian, Hannah, you know, like we were church together. Cameron, yeah, like we were church together for a few years. So like when I see him, something inside me lights up.
Yes.
And you guys know I'm required to quote the 4 Loves from C.S. Lewis once an episode. And he talks about how like when you lose someone, you don't just lose that person, but you lose that part of them in someone else. Like part of me only comes out when Christian's around. And if Christian were to disappear off the face of the earth, TJ wouldn't just lose Christian. TJ would lose that part of me that only comes out when Christian's there. So it's kind of compounded in that way. So when I see Niles, yeah, I get excited. I love Niles. He's still part of the church, capital C, right? And he's still someone I love and care for because at one point we were in community together. So at some point, like, or even just more recently at my work, I worked in the same city that my previous church was in. I saw some members of my parents' church, and I didn't avoid them and like, oh, this is awkward. I was so excited to see them. Like I lit up. My soul lit up. And yet I still don't feel a call back to that. But that doesn't mean that there's no connections there anymore. So I don't feel like it's such a black and white, you know, you know what I mean? Like this question is very rainbowed.
Yeah, it definitely depends. If you agreed to be like a youth ministry assistant and you just leave, then like you're kind of bad for that. But at the end of the day, if you leave the church, you left the church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just depends. Is it possible to find a church community online? Whether it's because you like can't find a church home in person, or you don't want to leave the house, or you can't leave the house, or you've got like strong social anxiety. Is it possible for online community?
Yeah. It's not preferable to me unless there are circumstances like some mentioned here that prevent you from actually leaving your house. If I were counseling someone, I would always say, hey, make actually visiting in person a priority. But if there's something that you are unable to do this, if your social anxiety is that bad, you're not able to handle being in a large group with a large group of people where you're all singing along, or something's being preached towards you, then stay at home, listen online in the comfort of your home, and give your tithes that way. Reach out to other people, say, hey, can you be praying for me or something like that? And yeah, sure. And maybe if you're able to, invite people over to actually visit with you and learn who you are, so that they know, hey, there's this person who's not able to attend, because of medical issues or what have you. So let's be the church to them. Let's reach out to them. A good church would do something like that to make you feel even more a part of that community. So I guess my answer is yes, but I would prefer, if possible, for you to actually attend in person.
Yeah, I'm gonna speak to this a little bit. My grandfather, for a large portion of his life when he got older, was not able to leave his house. And for that, I'm eternally grateful that there's such thing as online church, right? I'm so happy that he was able to listen to sermons online, to worship, to plug in and watch like courses. He took all the courses necessary to be ordained, but he got really scared when someone said, oh, you took everything to become a pastor. And then he stopped because he was like, oh, I don't want to be a pastor. So he stopped taking the courses. We're like, oh, we're not saying you have to be a pastor. That's not how it works. Yeah, God rest his soul. I miss my grandfather dearly, but so that was the thing. Like, he had real health reasons why he couldn't be there in person. So I get really aggravated when people online are like, "Oh no, you have to go to church in person." Like, some people can't. Let's start there.
Well, and something we didn't even mention, I don't think, was persecution. If you're not able to attend the church and an online church using a VPN or whatever to gain the means to watch a service somewhere, like, well, of course don't attend a church if you're gonna, whatever state sec is in your way trying to, persecute you and put you in jail for the crime of being a Christian. Be intelligent about it. We're told to be shrewd by Jesus, just as we're told to be innocent. And a good way of being shrewd in that scenario would be to not, go out there like a peacock and saying, hey, I attended church today, because that would end very poorly for that person.
Yeah. And it just, I will say, trying to word this well too, I don't want to give anything away. We have more than one listener, I will say that, in America. And when I say a bunch of listeners in America, I do get excited. But I get more excited because we do have 3 listeners in countries where I know for a fact the gospel has been outlawed. And I get really excited about that because that means there are 3 people who, I don't know if they're listening to other podcasts or not, but we are part of their church, which is a pretty limited group given where they're at. And that's awesome.
Yes.
And for me personally, I work Sundays. I have to work Sunday morning. So sometimes I'm able to go out or reach out to my local church and take communion, or the pastor will give me Eucharist separately from the rest of the group. So yeah, it is what it is. I listen to Pastor Will usually while I'm working. I'll be like cutting vegetables and stuff, and I have Will in my earbuds on YouTube. But also this is weird, but I have a community in podcast. Largely when I think of my church, I think of Pastor Will's sermons, and I think of some of the people I see on there, and I get a little bit nervous whenever I get to visit Will's church. I'm like, I'm going to know these people really well, and they're going to have no idea who I am because I'm an online member. So that's a little awkward. But then I have this community of like Christian, of John, Barbara, Justin, James, and I'm like, hey, when we see each other in person, we have so much fun. I even not necessarily part of any of our podcasts, but Ryan Doe's, I know when Ryan Doe sees me, his face is going to light up. And for me, for someone to see me and be happy about it, like, how bad my opinions are, I'm like, wow, that makes me feel really special.
Yes.
So I definitely think that online community is possible, because if it weren't, we wouldn't light up that way when we see one another in person finally. You know what I mean? Like those connections are real.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason I ask you guys how to let nothing move you. It's not because I agree with what you have to say. It's because I enjoy spending time with you, and I'm curious about what you're going to say, what you're going to do. How do I react to that? That's part of growing, is hearing other voices beside your own and seeing what they have to say on certain things. So,
yeah. And then not letting it move
I
you.
welcome that. Yeah,
Yeah.
of course, never being moved.
Never
Not even
letting
Will.
Josh move you at all.
Not even Will moved me, and I love Will.
Yeah. I've actually never
He
had
did have the
Christian
will to move you.
disagree with me.
Yeah.
That's probably
Never
why he's never moved. Let nothing move you. Especially like if you look really closely at his art logo, you might see the parentheses, especially if TJ agrees with you.
Yeah. So, after finding a new church home, how can people best get plugged in? Is it as simple as just going over to the pastor and say, "Hey, give me something to do"?
I mean, at the end of the day, first thing I would do is what I've practiced in the past. I'd say, what am I good at? And what am I not good at? So in prior churches, I have learned, hey, I love kids. I love working with kids, but I can never teach kids. So I'm not going to be in children's ministry, even though, yeah, I'll play with them all day long, but I'm not going to be responsible for answering the same question 50 times in a row. The repetition kills me. In that same way, I'm never going to be part of the hospitality stuff that is done in the church, because I am abysmal at such things. One would only need to look at my actual room, not being blurred by StreamYard right now, to see just how terrible I am handling my stuff. So God forbid I do that in a church setting with other people. But what I did is I learned I'm good here. I'm good with youth. I'm good with college students. I'm good with people of my own age, teaching them. But I only learned that by participating in such things, by figuring out where to go, but also to even join the church in the first place. Yeah, definitely talk to the pastors first. See what they're about. Let them sell you on that church, not in the, it's time for you to come over here so we can get your money, but like, hey, this is what our church is about. We have ministries here. We have opportunities here. We have small groups here, Sunday school here, what have you. This is what we're learning in Sunday. Their job is to tell you why you should join their church, why you should stay with them. Not for the sake of numbers, but for the sake of you finding a church home. So go to people that you hopefully can be trustful with and trusting with. Listen to them. And if you find at the end of that, yeah, I think I can trust this person, join. And then ask them. I had asked my new pastor, what did I say to him? He says the first time he'd ever been asked that in his ministry. I said something to the effect of, what do you expect out of me working alongside you? And he said that was one of the greatest questions he ever heard. And he told me about, how, I don't have to get in line with everything he has to say, but I have to support. I need to look out for people and seek out opportunities that no one else is going to look for, and that's other things as well. And I learned about those things because I dared to ask him a question like that. So be bold, ask those questions.
Yeah. I also feel like I want to. I'm trying to think of the right word here. In my mind, what I'm trying to do is very much like when you're trying to make a recipe and you use something to like cut how strong something else is. That's what I'm thinking. Sorry, my brain is weird today.
How's that different?
Yes, there's a level of like, hey, what am I good at? Let me participate at what I'm good at. But there's also a level of like, are you willing to be a servant?
Yes.
And I feel like for me, the question starts there and then builds to what am I good at? Like in my mind, if you are great at preaching, awesome. If you're not willing to clean the toilets and take out the trash, I don't care what you have to say when you're preaching. Just going to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Like you're great with kids. Cool. If you're not willing to clean up after the kids, I do not care. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm not just I'm trying not to think of this as like exclusionary, like in a church building setting, but like I think in general, if you're not willing to do the servant work, which that could have bad connotations, but hopefully people know what I mean.
Yes.
Check yourself before you try to engage. Basically is what I'm saying. Like, I don't care if you think you'd be the greatest children's teacher of all time. If you're not really willing to, clean up some dirty diapers or scrub a toilet, take out the trash, mow the lawn, start over. like I don't care how good a teacher you are. And of course there's physical handicap, stuff like that. Like, I'm not trying to say do stuff that you can't do. But I am saying be willing to be a servant.
I think a huge part of that is being able to do an honest self-assessment of yourself. And if you've never done that, well, the answer is no. Like, don't participate. Figure out who you are and be willing to do things that are outside your purview. It's like, I used to work as a janitor for some time. I have learned to be humble in that regard. It's like, do the same. Like, we're not saying that every church service you got to go out there and get nasty and make sure everything's sparkling clean. But we're saying when the opportunity presents itself, work, serve. Don't deny what is right in front of you and make someone else do it unless you're unable to do so. Like, you're unable to do so, don't worry about it. They find someone else. But if you are capable of doing so and you don't, well, there's that whole with great power comes great responsibility moment there. It's like you failed in that task.
Yeah. And this is always going to look different in different circumstances.
Yeah, I was just like, I work at a restaurant that prefers
What?
not to be named on social media. But
Whoa.
part of my job is making sure the food is good and safe, and part of my job is sometimes laying on the floor to clean the bottom of the wall. That's what you got to do. It's part of your responsibilities. So you have to be willing to do the dirty work if you want to do the fun work.
Yeah,
I mean, not to toot my own horn here, but I earned a lot of points not even thinking about what I was doing when the first time we opened up our gym for the first time in it's been a while, to other people like playing in it. When I asked for the giant dust mop to clean up afterward, and I was told, hey, look, we do have custodians for that. They can do it. It was like, well, I was here. I can take care of it right now. And what they were saying about me after that was very positive. Like, I don't think we've had someone say that in a while. Be willing to do something like that. And I wasn't like, look at me, I'm cleaning when I don't have to. No, there was something that could be done. So I did it.
Yeah. And I love using those mops. I use those mops every chance I got. I love the big dust mop.
Yeah. I've been to many churches, and I don't want anyone to feel bad for anything by this, but I want us to think deeply about these things of where we're serving, when we're needed, how we're needed, kind of thing. And yes, what are you good at? But also, Are you willing to do the dirty stuff? Like these are all important questions. My parents' Pastor Gary, I mentioned him a lot this episode because I love him. I do know that he used to clean the bathrooms at that church, and it is not a small church, which means the bathrooms were not clean after service. Read between the lines. It was a nasty job, but it saved the church money, which allowed them to do different things where they're giving to the community and other stuff rather than hiring a janitor. And I'm like, oh wow, that's awesome. But I also know churches where I'm like, oh, hey, why don't we just clean this ourselves? They're like, well, actually, there's somebody who couldn't find a job, and we gave them a job cleaning the bathrooms. So I don't do that, so that I let them do it. And I'm like, oh, man, that's equally as good. Circumstances are different from church to church, and it's important to know why your church is doing what it's doing before figuring out what you need to do. Because sometimes you're like, oh, man, I'll clean the toilets. So, well, actually, no, we're paying somebody to do that because he can't find a job anywhere else. He's like, okay, well, actually, maybe I shouldn't clean the toilets in that situation,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
TJ?
no, I'm good.
Okay. What responsibility do you think we have to our new churches as far as contributing to the community? So once we're in a new church, we've thought about ourselves, we've done some of this reflections. Are we responsible for doing these things, or is it okay if I only show up on Easter and Christmas?
My personal conviction in this regard is that if I am in a church in any way, shape, or form, I'm serving somewhere. It doesn't have to be every week, but it's got to be somewhere. If I'm not, then am I really working in that church? If I am physically able to do these things, then I would argue, no, I'm not really a member of that church. I just show up on Sunday and listen a couple of times. And yeah, I'm listening to the word. That's a good thing, but where's my heart in it? Because I have, just to be perfectly honest, been in churches in the past where I joined and did nothing, said I would do things, and then didn't, because it's easier not to do stuff. It's easier for me to say, well, if I go to church and work here with the kids, or if I help with the cleanup, or if I help with some homeless ministry, then that's less video game time. Or I can even be noble and say, look, it's less time for me to be reading the books and studying the things that are going to make me a great pastor one day. And both of those are equally wrong. Both of those are equally evil. So for me personally, I can never be a part of a church without serving in some capacity, because I know my heart instinct is to say, well, someone else will take care of it, and I don't have to do anything about it. Let them do it. And that's a terrible way of looking at things, because God has put me there for a reason, and part of that is working and serving in the church, wherever that is that he has you.
Yeah, no, for sure. I like that. Yeah, and I just want to throw out there, even in online communities, that is still a thing. I'm going to use two examples here, because you know what? I'll do three because I want to challenge our listeners for the third one. Number one, I'm a member of Will's Church. I live hours away from Will's Church, but I am able to occasionally. I take his homilies, I edit them and put them up on a podcast, and I make sure that as many people as I am able to reach with my means can hear that message, because that is something I can do even from a distance. So I had to get a little bit creative, but I figured it out because I want to contribute, because this is my church.
Well, real quick on that before you go to your next one.
Okay.
I'm one of those people who listens to those because I really enjoy them, because I've only been at Holy Trinity Lutheran Church in person one time, and it was very fun. It's not a church I would ever join, as we discussed earlier, but I still like listening to Will, and this is an opportunity for me to hear that. And you've reached other people that way. I really enjoy the work you've put into that effort.
Thank you. And I love Will, and I appreciate Will. And if Will's listening, we all love Will. On three, we love Will. 1, 2. TJ's not going to do it. 3. We love Will. TJ kind of did it. Okay, so the other example though, systematic ecology, right? Like, we have people who are helping host that show. We have people. Well, I do most of the edits, but even the other hosts, we're like, hey, how can we make this easier on you? What can we do so you're not editing every single thing? We have people who listen, who are patrons, who donate to the show, who are helping financially. We have people who show up at events and help us set up and do things, and encourage us that way. People who've donated to GoFundMe's but don't do the subscriptions. Then people who are just active in the Discord, who are just talking to one another. We have 3 people that I can think of off the top of my head that I know regularly are going to post on that Facebook group so that people see it and are engaging with what's happening there. And that's not a church. That's mostly a fandom stuff, but it's still a community. And a lot of different people are contributing in different ways. And it's all online for the most part. So that to me is really encouraging because that tells me this is possible. It is possible to do this community thing online. Which then thinks of the Whole Church podcast where we've not had as much online engagement. But hey, our listeners could jump on Discord right now and just engage with us in conversation. Ask us, hey, look, have you had this guy on a guest? What about this? I have, shout out Josh Patterson. He messaged me pretty regularly, like, hey, you should have this author on. You should have this guy on. And that's a way to really be engaged with this community online. So you can still do that. There are ways you don't have to show up in person. And the main reason I bring that up isn't because I think there's a lot of people listening to this who are only doing church online, but rather because there's probably a lot of people listening to this who do church in person, but are too busy to show up to the church during the week, to mow the lawn, to clean the toilets, or whatever else. Maybe you work a 10-hour-a-day job. A lot of people do. There are still ways you can engage without physically being there all the time. It's a thing. Yeah. So last big question, Christian. How do we stay both involved in our local church communities, which is mostly what we've been talking about today, but still pursue unity with that larger global church, that capital C church that we mentioned earlier?
I mean, once you've plugged yourself in, once you've got things figured out, it can't hurt to see what other churches in your community are doing. If you're organizing a food drive and the Methodist church along the way and the Catholic church along the way are doing the same thing, why not coordinate? Why not make sure that the people they're serving, if they're not able to give everything they could, that you have the resources you can offer? If you're not able to do that, say, hey, we're short here. Do you guys have anything else you can spare? Like, you can get things done in the community just with your church, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. I mean, you're doing the Lord's work, but it would be more efficient to make sure you're not doing more than you need to, and that other churches aren't doing more than they need to, because you could work together. And yeah, we're going to argue over doctrine all day long. Like, I'm not going to take the Eucharist, in a Catholic setting, but I can still work alongside with someone in a homeless ministry to say, hey, these are the people we've been working with. Who have you guys been working with? And then coordinate and see who's getting what they need and who isn't, so we can do something about it.
Yeah. I'm going to make a quick comment and then another question, and then I'm going to shut up and let TJ finish this. Quick comment was, because this is just a really weird, like, usually we think of like how we can coordinate food drives and that kind of stuff. And I think that's good stuff and the stuff that we should do, but getting really specific on a very personal basis. I know of a story, and I'm going to be as vague as possible here, of a woman who had been part of a church and asked for a lot of money to help with bills, and then got that help, and then left that church, went to another church, and then got a lot of money to help with her bills, and then left that church, went to another church. And it wasn't till like 4 or 5 churches down that one of the churches reached out to the new church and said, hey, she's actually been doing this a lot, and what she needs isn't financial help, because she's been ripping churches off. And hey, I'm not saying this is common, and this is not like, hey, here's a reason why we shouldn't be giving money to people. No, let's still help people. Let's assume the best in people, right? But let's also talk to one another, because this lady needed help because she had a drug problem. And it wasn't until someone finally reached out to the new church and said, hey, this has been happening a lot, that pastor was able to talk to her, figure out what was going on, and get her into drug rehab. Not, hey, I'm going to refuse you money, but rather, no, what's the actual problem? Let's address these real problems. And it wasn't, but we have to learn to work with each other, because like, if we're going to really help people, sometimes we don't get the full story until we can actually hear from one another, So that was the quick comment. The other question was, I feel like a lot of people think they're like cheating on their church. Like if I go to a Catholic church to see what it's, because like a lot of times our guests say, hey, you should attend a church service other than your own. They're like, well, wait a minute. I'm loyal to my church. Why would I go visit another church? Or, they feel like if I go to a food drive that the Methodist church is going on, I'm supporting them and all their beliefs. And I don't know what they believe necessarily. Like there's a lot of this, am I cheating on my church kind of mentality. So could you speak to that real quick?
Yeah. I mean, sure, all day long, I could help out some LGBT affirming church, and they're organizing a food drive. Well, yeah, I disagree with their theology. I disagree with how they run things, but the fact of the matter is, they're offering food to someone in need. And I would have to be a very cold-hearted person to say, well, they're not doing anything good. Yeah, is it the good that I would prefer it be done? No, but it's still for the betterment of others. It's still, they didn't have to do that. It's for any organization. It doesn't even have to be the church. If there's some agnostic or atheist or whatever organization that is delivering supplies to the needy, well, does that mean I've given up on Jesus Christ just because I helped them out and I gave them money? No, it means you help someone you wouldn't have normally have been given access to by utilizing other means. That's called being shrewd. That's called being loving as well. You can be shrewd and loving in the same, action. Do that because you don't know who you're going to impact. And maybe they'll learn like, hey, like, where'd that money come from? Or where'd that person come from? Why are they volunteering with you? Well, don't they disbelieve everything you agree with? Well, share why you stay with people like that. And that can start a conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a good pastor will encourage you to do those things. If you ask them like, hey man, I was thinking about going to this food drive, but a Methodist church is doing it. I can say with certainty that if I told Will I was going to go help this food drive in Charlotte, but an SBC church was in charge, Will would be like, well, hurry up and get there. Like, he's not going to question what they believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what else might we not have thought about that it could be important to think about after finding a new church home?
I don't think I've mentioned prayer this whole time, and that's more on me because I'm really bad about that in my own life. I mean, just pray. Just ask. What do you want me to do? Where do you want me to go? Is this because I'm thinking it's a good idea? And I can even give an example of that. There was a church when I was church shopping a couple months ago to try and find a new spot that I really enjoyed. I liked the preaching. The people were very friendly, but there was just nagging feeling that said, no, I don't want you here. And it made no sense to me because everything else looked perfect. So I didn't go back after that one visit. And I found out later on that they just ended up in a split over, who should be the lead pastor and everything. And I was like, oh, well, if I had stayed, yeah, I could probably get some good or something in there in that scenario, but I'm also the new guy. What really could I have done? I would have been in the midst of that. Like, I don't even know who to follow in that scenario. So best not to even be involved in the first place. So the praying to God for direction and that helped me get out of a situation that could have been way worse if I hadn't listened. If I hadn't prayed about it.
Yeah. I have a story too. And it's from, I think it's our third or fourth episode on the whole church, going back like 270 episodes.
Ooh.
My parents, when we moved to Tallahassee, Florida, we were trying to find a church home. The denomination that they've always been a part of their whole lives did not have a church in the city that they moved to. Trying to figure out where to go. They ended up going to an Assemblies of God church. They felt like this was right. They knew, they prayed, whatever. And the way my dad tells the story on our podcast, just terrible audio quality. But if you go back and listen, this is how he tells it. He prayed like every day. He was like, God, why do you have me at this church? My dad was ordained in the Church of God of Prophecy, and here he is as an Assemblies of God church. He's like, well, I can't preach here unless I get reordained. I can't do this, whatever. Like, why am I here? They both computer skills. My mom was going to school to become a teacher. It's like, well, was she supposed to teach children? That would make sense, right? But they already have a really awesome children's pastor. Kept praying. And then one day, my dad just saw this detention center. This children's detention center, and he felt called to it. And they ended up starting to go to this place, and they had to get special permission because so many churches before this have started and then left. And that's even worse for the kids than if you did nothing.
Ugh.
And they had to be like truly prove that they were going to be committed to this thing. And this church was the absolute best church ever when it came to supporting them and getting behind this and sending people there. And even after we moved, which was forever ago, over 20 years ago, they still do that detention ministry at that detention center that my parents started. And like, it was to the point where they were doing like these huge big fairs and stuff. And Jeb Bush, who was the governor at the time, actually, we have a letter from him thanking my parents for doing the detention center. And it's just one of those like, man, they made such a big impact in this little community, not little, the capital of Florida. They made a huge impact there. And it was because they just prayed, like what Christian's saying there. Like, just sometimes pray is what you need to do. That's it. You found a church home. Now ask God, why am I here? What do you want me to do? Because, yeah, he's probably got a plan.
Yeah, I have. There's a trivia game called Better Wizard. Long story short, Jeb Bush is one of the answers for one of the politics categories, and it's tricky because they're like
Great.
presidential candidate, from Texas, and everyone was like, "Well, it's not Jeb. Jeb was from Florida. Jeb was Florida governor, born in Texas." But super fun. I thought Jeb Bush was a hilarious dude.
Yeah, that's true. Jeb, I just liked Stephen Colbert making fun of his entire campaign because it was just Jeb with an exclamation mark. So Colbert refused to let any of his guests say Jeb. It's Jeb. Yeah, great times.
Special year.
Yeah. Politics have become weirdly relevant this episode for some reason. And not because we're being political, we're just referencing them.
Yeah,
Like
so let's talk about the
weirdos.
private prison system.
Well, with that, Christian, I don't know if you know this, but we always like to ask every guest when they're on, before wrapping up, if you had to provide a single tangible action, something practical that people could do to better engender church unity, what's one practical action that you would have our listeners go do right now?
I mean, I guess I'll continue from what I just said earlier. Like, just pray. And I'm saying that to me as well because I suck. My prayer life is abysmal. I never remember to do it unless something is affecting me. But if we get better about that, if we actually start praying for the people around us, for the people who don't think the same way that we do, I think it'll do a lot in our own hearts. And God will open up opportunities in their own as well. That wouldn't have happened if you had just remained silent.
Mm-hmm. So is that what we're seeing change if everyone just keeps praying? It's hard to remember to do. I definitely forget sometimes.
Indeed, it is. Like I said, I'm the worst of the worst. But when I do, there is something that changes in me that gets me to focus not on me, gets me to focus on, yeah, I can pray for myself. There's nothing wrong with that. But what about these other people who need God in their lives? Well, if I'm asking about them in my prayer life, what am I going to do in my public life? I should be following my prayer life and asking about them and working with them and feeling what they're going through and empathizing with them as best as possible. So the more people who do that, the better the church is going to end up being.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So before we wrap it all the way up, we do this little thing called our God moment, where we like to ask everyone where they saw God recently, whether it be a blessing, moment of worship, challenge, whatever it may be. I always make Josh go first to give us plenty of time to think about our answers, because Josh is just always thinking about his. So
That is true. I pray without ceasing and meditate on God moments day and night. See, the thing is, like, I've been feeling this God moment, but I haven't like articulated it yet. So I apologize, listeners. This might sound like a bunch of rambling. If you've been listening, and again, this has been all out of order, and I apologize because, next week I think you're going to hear me complain about how terrible my week 3 weeks ago was. Sorry. Anyway, I've had I had a dishwasher break and then had to replace the dishwasher because it broke a second time after we fixed it. I had 2 cars break. A cat pee on me at one point during one of these bad days. I just had a lot of really bad days the last 3 weeks that have been very financially draining. So please consider being a Patreon. But oh man, I during all of that, and yes, it's been bad, and I think it might start getting better. It hasn't yet, but I think it might be about to start getting better. This is just so odd of me to realize, but I noticed that my garden, and if you've been listening for years, you'll know that I have a butterfly garden outside of my house. It's gotten very unruly. There's a lot of weeds and different stuff that I just haven't been caring for. And just kind of this realization of like, God cares for the garden There is wars in Israel going on. There is political riots in America. There's like everything just completely going to crap in our world. But God doesn't forget his garden. And that's the church. And I'm just kind of like, hey, I'm part of this thing that even when the world is complete garbage, God somehow remembers to take care of it. God is so freaking cool. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, I've been closing store recently. It's a new thing. Normally I don't do that. Normally I open. But last night I was closing and had the
Stop
perfect plan. Got everything figured out. Everyone in the building was going to leave by 11:30. We close at 11. So instead what happened is, the plan is happening. Everyone's doing what they're supposed to do. We're going to do it. We're going to all leave at 11:30. And the power goes out at 10:58.
I can only imagine how absolutely livid TJ was at the universe.
Yeah. So the power went out. And we have to do a bunch of stuff. We have to call the people and be like, yeah, our food's cold. Yeah. They do that like every hour. And then you just have to stay until the power comes back on. I'd like to say, not only am I grateful that the power was only off for about 2 hours,
Oh, God.
but also because the store was already closed. All we had left to do was clean a couple of pots. So I just did that. I sat around and I met a dog. There was a dog walking around outside in the pitch black because all of the street lights were off and all of the store lights were off, which looks really cool to just see. But I saw a dog and I got to feed a stray dog some rice. Yeah. Because I didn't take the trash out yet. So I just got the leftover rice trash bag and scooped some rice out of there and fed a dog. It was cool. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
Thank
Out
God,
of this
good.
unnamed restaurant.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a good time.
That is a good one, though.
I was also safe, so thank God.
Yeah.
Good.
I'm glad you
Great
didn't
area.
go first. That was too cool of a God moment.
So, Christian, do you have a God moment for us?
Yeah. Not too long ago, I got to go to Chattanooga. One of the kids my mom pretty much watched when he was younger is pretty much just another brother. He and his brothers to me got married, so got to enjoy the fruits of that. But really, what is cool about that is I got to see my niece again, hang out with her, just watch her as she's grown, watch her as she's walking around, getting into everything, things she's not supposed to, learning how to talk back right now, getting people upset, but also being the sweetest thing in the world that, man, it'd be real hard not to kill someone if she asked me to. I'm going to have to learn to be better about that, about myself. But another part of that was fun, since I'm going to cheat like I always do and do more things, is I got to actually meet Nick Polk in person for the first time. And I got him. I managed to get myself a copy of the DVD, it's not DVD, the CD for Jesus Freak, hand it to him and say, can you please, when you go to Theology Beer Camp, get Kevin Max to sign this for me? And he said, dude, I got you. And we get to have some Japanese food together, have a good time. That was wonderful.
So first I want to say I changed my God moment. My God moment is now I just Nick Polk exists. That's my God moment. But also, hey guys, if you're listening, whoa, Kevin Max, whoa, DC Talk, whoa, Theology Beer Camp. That's right. That's a thing that TJ and I will be at. And you can get $50 off a ticket by going to the website and using the code WHOLESHIRE, WHOLESHIRE, at checkout. We get credit for that, and that makes us feel cool. So do that maybe. And you'll see Nick Polk. He'll be there. And you'll have your own God moment.
Yeah. I've also just been informed the power is now out at the store again. So please consider sharing this episode with a friend.
That's great.
Enemy, cousin. We love them all. Get the episodes out there so more people can
Wait a
from
minute.
the lack of power.
Jesus said love your enemy. He didn't say I have to love my cousin. Come on,
No, he
DJ.
does.
No, I love all my cousins.
Yeah,
They're some of my favorite friends. They're like my besties if they're listening. And if they're not listening, they're still my besties. We actually have a group text that we use pretty regularly. And I should share the link to this episode in that group text. Also, guys, hey, if you want to see other stuff that Christian Ashley does, because all other podcasts are run by Christian Ashley, go to the Unsolved Ministry Podcast Network website in the description down below. You can see Let Nothing Move You. You can see the Joe Rogan Show. You can't see that one. You could see Systematic Ecology. You could see Why I Don't Like, which is where Christian just talks about stuff that he doesn't like. Usually it's about me, I think. I don't know. I don't listen. Just kidding. I'm kidding. It's about shows he doesn't like, and he gives real reasons why he doesn't like them instead of just complaining, and evaluates them fairly, in my opinion. But I don't know the show he's been reviewing, so it could be unfair. I don't know.
I'll take it.
It's called the Joe Rogan Experience.
Oh, the Christian Ashley
Not
Experience?
The Joe Rogan Show. Yeah.
Can we create a new
we hope you
show
enjoy
without
it.
Christian that's called the Christian Ashley Experience? We're just
Yeah.
me and you talk about
It
Christian.
just talks about experiences with Christian Ashley. Just get random people. Oh, you've met Christian? Let's talk about him.
Yeah.
I
It's
like
gonna be
this.
like
This
street
is the
talk.
new show.
I can never be on and I can never listen.
Yeah, but your mom will be a frequent guest.
Oh, of
She
course.
seems pretty cool.
Yes.
Yeah. So we hope you enjoyed it. Next week, we're going to have on pastors Rachel and Greg Hoffman to discuss what's next after marriage, which is not the same as what's after divorce. We mean after marriage and before divorce. Then we're going to have on Jake, not to imply that you're going to get divorced, but then we're going to have on
Say,
Jake
wait a
Edwards
minute.
to discuss.
Is divorce necessary?
But then we're going to have on Jake
Why does
Edwards
that
to
get
discuss
so depressing?
what's next after divorce. And after that, we're going to have pastors Will Rose and Brandon Knight. I feel like it's fair to call him a pastor. He's a traveling pastor, minister, and that helps.
Yeah, he's
To
cool.
discuss what's
Cool guy.
next
Cool
after
guy
receiving a
Knight.
call into ministry or going through seminary. And at the end of season 1, Francis Chan will be joining us.
Do you think Brandon Knight might have started
Yeah.
calling him the Dark Knight and Francis Chan the Light Knight?
I think there could be a couple issues with that.
Brandon Knight might also be on the final episode with the Light Knight, who also hasn't been informed of the episode. So someone's got to tell him. And get Christopher Nolan to direct it. I can't edit this episode. That's gotten to be too much. Yeah,
I don't think we can afford that.
it's fine.
If more people join the Patreon, of course.
Yeah. Join that Patreon.
A lot more people.